With that, we will move on to the next article, Article 16, the Tax Increment Financing Agreement. Now, I'm going to make the initial presentation, and then we are going to hear from Jerry Evans from the CHDC. So,
Let me just pull it up, Mike.
yes, please. So the first slide is just going to say that they moved to take affirmative action on Article 16 as printed in the warrant. Aha. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the summary of the article is two parts to it. Approve a revised tax increment financing agreement between the town and Junction Village ALF Limited Partnership. The revised agreement is posted online as part of this package. And it also authorizes the select board to actually execute the TIF. Next slide. So the background on this has been a project since quite a while ago. It consists of 83 units of affordable assisted living housing for low, very low, and moderate income households. The property was given to the CHDC by the state in 2013 with the restriction that the property could only be used for affordable housing and open space. The proposed building would occupy approximately 4 acres of the site, and the remaining approximate 8 acres would be protected by open space. Next slide. This is a aerial view. You can see the top, the prison, and the dotted blue line down below is the proposed building. And over to the right, you can see the Assabet River. And the next slide is a close-up and is a site of the proposed facility on the site itself. Next slide. So this has been in front of town meeting for a number of years. In 2017, a Community Preservation Committee appropriation of $350,000 for the project was approved. Additional CPC appropriations were approved at town meeting in 2018 and 2019 for a combined $650,000. And at town meeting in 2017, $1 million was appropriated from free cash. In town meetings 2011, 12, and 13 approved $200 for pre-development, of which 78 remains and earmarked for open space and closing details. And the proposed Junction Village budget included an annual payment of $75,000 to the town and a ground lease to the CHDC. This is important because this was the amount that was in the budget for taxes and a ground lease when the project was approved when the $1 million allocation was approved from free cash for the project. Next slide, please. Grantham has applied to the state and received tax credits in the amount of $7.5 million. And when these are sold, the hopeful yield is 6.9 in available funds. Grantham has already also received $3.325 million in soft debt from DHCD. These are from a number of sources, and $485,398 from the home consortium. So the point here is that there are a lot of participants in trying to make this a viable package. Next slide, please. So the TIF. The TIF is an application to the state as part of an economic development incentive program. And this particular one is just called a local incentive only application. If granted, it allows the select board to create an economic opportunity area at the proposed site of Junction Village. And to be able to do that, certain criteria need to be met. And the enabling criteria for this particular project is the creation of 30 full-time positions, ranging from aides to an executive director. If granted, it allows the select board to execute the TIF if approved at town meeting. So next slide. What is a TIF? A TIF, a tax increment financing mechanism, allows the town essentially to reduce up to for a 20-year period the property valuation of a project resulting from its development in an economic opportunity area. In so doing, the taxes assessed on the property would thereby also be temporarily reduced. Property valuation for the project would vary over the period based on the percentage reduction in valuation contained in the TIF, the tax rate, and the commercial success of the property. Because unlike, if you don't know, unlike residential property, property assessments do have to do with the success of the various commercial property. So the next slide will point up an example. So the example of this is if the assessor's property valuation, including personal property, was $10 million, they would have a tax liability of $187,000. The TIF, if it was granted, would reduce, in this example, by 60%. So what that would do would reduce the assessor's property valuation from from 10 million to 4 million, and thereby revise the tax liability from 187,000 to 75,000. Next slide, please. The actual revised TIF, as you might recall, TIF, when we first began, this was for a 17-year period. It's been revised to a 15-year period. The property valuation is $13,982,443, and it has a property valuation percentage reduction of 77%. A draft agreement is on a file with the town clerk and is also posted on the town website, as I said, as part of this material. Next slide, please. So some important points that I want to make. This kind of a project is very complicated because on the one hand, the rates, because all of the units in this property are affordable, the amount that can be charged for all of these units is fixed. So the revenue for the particular project is fixed. The amount that project will pay in taxes if the TIF is approved is exactly the same amount that was proposed in the budget when town funds were allocated to support the project. This is important because in the MOU that we signed with the organization, they stated that they would not ask for any additional funds, and they haven't. This is the same amount that they proposed in the original presentation to the town. It's very important to understand that if the finances, the income statements and capital budgeting for the project does not appear feasible, the tax investor will simply not purchase the projects. If you don't know, the tax investor, while it's $7.5 million, and forgetting exactly what the net would be, these are paid out over a 10-year period, and the tax investor needs to be involved in the project for the full 15 years of the TIF. That's why the TIF is laid out in a 15-year period. And the tax investor is not going to invest in this property if they do not see a budget that allows this project to be financially feasible. And I've said before, because the project is restricted to affordable housing, its revenues are fixed and limited by regulation. They cannot invest in this affordable housing project without documented assurance of long-term financial feasibility. And last point I want to make, because I've heard a number of people raise this point, the town is not foregoing any revenue by granting the TIF. There is no alternative project. If the TIF isn't granted, there won't be a project, and the town will lose 83 units of affordable assisted living housing and the tax and grant lease fees. So I think this is very important. If we had 2 or 3 competing projects, we could talk about which one would give the town the most revenue or how much revenue would be foregone if we chose A over B. But that's not the case here. The only project that we have in front of us is this one. And this is the TIF that is necessary to make the project feasible over the life of this project. And when the TIF ends, the project can continue to be feasible because, as you will recall, Grantham will take out an $8 million loan in order to make sure this project gets built. And that loan will expire at the time the TIF expires, so that the debt and payment on the debt and principal payment on the $8 million loan can then be used, instead of making a debt payment, can be used to offset operating expenses and allow us then to get the tax according to what will be the valuation of the property at that time. So next and last slide then is simply the same as the first one, that the town take affirmative action on Article 16 as printed in the warrant. So next, Chris, if I could ask you to turn on the audio and video for Jerry Evans from the CHDC. He has a statement that he would like to make.
Hold on.
You could probably stop screen sharing.
Jerry has joined us. I don't know if that's.
While we're working to bring Jerry Evans in, I just want to point something out to any attendee who does want to make a comment. When you're brought in to join the panel and make your comment, you'll see a brief interval where Zoom sort of disconnects, or there's a little bit of flurry on your screen to show that you're changing your status. You are not being dropped from the call. You're being moved from one state to another, just a procedural matter.
Good, thank you, Dean. So I see Jerry's name, so I hope that
I'm here.
Making progress. All right, Chris, are we going to turn on his video, or is it just an audio?
Jerry, can you turn on your video? Great.
There you go. All right, Jerry, hello. Please identify yourself for the record.
Jerry Evans, 1844 Main Street. Thank you, Mike, for the opportunity. Junction Village has been an ongoing project which started in the mid-90s. The town was owed affordable homes from the Waldenwood project, which bought out a development near Waldenwood that would have contained affordable units. The culmination of the promise was the state giving the land behind the prison to CHDC. There were several fits and starts to the development of the property until, following a competitive RFP process with extensive public comment, CHDC awarded the project to Grantham. Currently, neither the town nor CHDC receives any revenue or income from the property. In February 2016, Grantham and CHDC entered into a development agreement for the project. That agreement states that the amount Grantham will pay to CHDC under a ground lease will depend upon the negotiation of a payment in lieu of taxes, pilot, or a TIF agreement with the town. Originally, it was felt that the pilot would be the way to go. However, the town assessor felt that the TIF was a better option. This is how we arrived at where we are. It was an oversight by the CHDC board that the discussions took place so far down the road and not a last-minute development ploy by the developer. Here we are at the proverbial finish line, and the tax issue is up for approval. On behalf of the board, as the only remaining board member from that time era, I apologize it was not brought up earlier. As I mentioned, we're at the finish line of a long process. There's been 7 town meetings for this project, all successful. The state has contributed above their standards, demonstrating their commitment to the project, which is a credit to the developer and the town. This is the last approval, and then the project is ready to go. As Mike mentioned, there's no plan B, so we want to move this forward. Thank you.
Mike, you're muted.
You're muted, Mr. Chairman.
Can't read my lips. Sorry. Mr. Ohanian, I know, is here, and I wonder if he wants to make a statement, or do you just want to be on hand, Walter, to answer any questions that may come up?
Hey, Mike, thank you. And I would like to make a statement if that's possible.
Yes, it is. If you do, you want to have your video turned on? Are you decent?
Yeah, I'm decent. It's not a problem.
Okay. All right. Chris, can you manage that technology feat?
Yep.
And Walter, when you come on, would you please identify yourself for the record?
Sure. So I think I'm on audio.
There, you're pretty dark, but I can see you. Oh, no, that's Andrea Zale. Sorry.
Sorry, Walter, we're promoting you to a panelist. You should reconnect. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
We can hear you. Why don't you go ahead, Walter? There
we go. Okay, perfect. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it. Mike, Jerry, and everyone here tonight, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak and to see that we're finally at the finish line for this project and all that it is going to offer and bring to the town of Concord. So really the reason for the TIF is the necessity that we have to keep a budget for this project. As we know, the revenues here are restricted, and to be able to present something to both the bank as well as the tax credit investor to make the project financially feasible, this is an area of importance. So we talked about job creation. You know, these are considered hero jobs, especially everything that we have seen in the last 4 or 5 months. It is really heartwarming to see people put themselves in a place where they are taking care of our most at-risk population in the job that they have done these past few months, not having concerns of people that they're leaving at home and people that they are making sure that they care for. They know they have a job and they're here to do it. So appreciate that. And these are people that we want working in our community to take care of our most vulnerable population. Also, this is going to add 83 units of affordable housing stock for the town of Concord and going to help keep us hopefully over that 10%. In projects like this, being age restricted, will also have less impact on town services. This project will add economic vitality to downtown. We are talking about residents, we're talking about staff, we're talking about families, and people that can hopefully spend some time in the downtown with us being so close to it and being able to enjoy the shops and the restaurants and everything that it has to offer. It's a development of a property that's in need of revitalization. And this project will help put it's basically a $20 million development. And besides the project and the building that's going to go there and the services that it's going to offer, there's also going to hopefully be at some point some open space. And having our project there is a way to get there. And Grantham is actually committing, as we recall, $50,000 in helps to be able for us to get there as well. So in an effort to move this project forward and all the recognition that the state has seen that the town has done, they actually did something which was quite significant. One is that they awarded this project in time of crisis, which is really just amazing to think that they are making awards of affordable housing and development and spending money during these economic times. But assisted living communities are typically maxed at $5 million in allocation for funds, for tax credits. None of my projects have ever received anything over $5 million. But recognizing what this project is and the cost that it's going to be to build and the site that it needs to redevelop on, they actually allotted $7.5 million in credits, which is just outstanding. In addition, they also did an increase in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund money as well. Typically, they are maxed out at $1 million, but for this project, they actually awarded $1.5 million. You know, I do understand that there are obviously questions around every project that comes through town, and you do have some people that are going to question you every step of the way. And we've heard those in this community, and we've also heard them in other communities we've developed in. But I do know our town is committed to creating affordable housing. We have created our own affordable housing trust with the town and are trying to be creative in ways to develop and promote affordable housing. So this project will bring that to the town. This project will help our neighbors with a variety of socioeconomic backgrounds and allow for greater diversity and inclusivity in our town, and that's what we're fighting for. So I hope that after tonight's discussion, people really get a good understanding of our project and will vote affirmatively to move this TIF forward. Thank you.
It's a little late, but could you identify yourself and tell us where you live for the record?
So Walter Ohanian, 488 Elm Street, Concord, Mass. Managing Director for the Grantham Group, which is manager and agent to the project and developer.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so let me turn first to the Finance Committee and the Select Board. If you have a question or a comment, raise your hand. Terry, I see your hand. We'll go Terry, Mary, and Phil.
And Tom.
And Tom.
And Brian.
Okay, well, just to don't confuse me, I can do 3 or 4 people, but that's it. Terry, you're first.
Hey, I have some questions for Mr. Ohanian. This project will help low and moderate income seniors and the community. That's great. And Mr. Ohanian, if the town does not vote to approve the TIF, then will you still be able to proceed with the Junction Village project?
No, not as it currently stands, unfortunately, Terry. The taxes that are planned to be assessed to the property just make it financially infeasible to move forward.
So you're saying that the TIF will help to make the project financially feasible?
Correct.
Okay. And we understand you're a very experienced developer, very well known in the state. And what I really don't understand, maybe you can help me with this, why did you sign the MOA with the CHDC in 2017? And I'm going to quote from item 11. It says, the developer agrees not to request any financial support from the town other than the town funds for the construction and development of the project.
Sure. So if you remember, we had something called the Junction Village Task Force. Terry, do you remember that by chance?
Yes.
Okay, great. And one of the recommendations they have for the project was to create a TIF. Am I correct?
Yes.
You know, that is what people are saying now. I'm going to pull that up.
That's exactly what it says. It says there are a number of, at the very bottom. Excuse me.
That's not exactly my read of it. When I'm looking at this document right here, it's a one-page document from April of 2016, and it lists 4 actions by the town, and then it says other possible sources of financial assistance. The TIF is the very last one, and it seems a very outside chance that we would need it, and it didn't really look like a recommendation from this committee at that time.
Yeah, so when we did get the recommendations from the Junction Village Task Force, as Jerry had mentioned, we worked on a development agreement with CHTC, and that is obviously one of the reasons why we have it in the development agreement as well, that we would move forward to apply for either a pilot or a TIF agreement.
But I don't understand. Okay, the Junction Village Funding Committee was in 2016.
Correct.
MOA was signed in 2017 after that.
Yep.
And again, it says the developer agrees not to request any financial support from the town except for the $2 million in construction and development that we've already promised. So this is what I'm having trouble with.
Sure.
It just seems that the TIF is, it's not direct cash, but it is helping to make the project financially feasible.
Correct.
So I guess I just have a comment then.
Okay.
To the town. It just appears to me that the way this process has been handled, just not everything has been very forthcoming. And this is the second time that this has happened, because when the bids first went out, there was also 500,000 that was suddenly needed because the developer was surprised we were going to need a sewer system for the project. And so I just want to ask the citizens of Concord, when you're deciding how to vote on this article, you know, we definitely want affordable housing. That's not the question. But we want to be able to trust the developer to build quality homes, care well for the seniors, and not come back for the town for any more financial assistance. Thank you.
Mary?
Thank you, Mike. I've got a comment and then two questions. My first comment is that you emphasized in your presentation that the town was aware of the budget of $75,000 for taxes and the land lease to the CHDC when we approved the free cash and the CPC funds. And yet several months ago at the Finance Committee, we took a straw vote to ask the people at the Finance Committee if they were aware of that when they voted to approve the free cash and the CPC funds. And in fact, the majority of the finance people were not aware of that. And we tend to look at these kinds of things. So that committee was not aware of that when we approved or when we voted for the free cash funds to be released. We can't go back and redo that vote, but we can do something now about the TIF to maybe make it less financially, cost us less now. So
I would just, Mary, ask you to go back and look at the presentation that was made at town meeting. It has it quite explicitly in there what the tax and ground lease payments were going to be to the town. I don't think people understood that that was going to require a TIF, and I don't think people really understood that that was going to be significantly less than what an assessed value would be for most property. So. Well, that seems.
I'm just saying what happened at the Finance Committee meeting where we went around and we took a straw vote, and the people in that meeting were not aware of that when they voted to approve it. Okay, I'm just going by that. That happened. Okay. My questions are, first of all, my first question is, I know you don't have any flexibility with the revenue because you're affordable. And this is a question for Mr. Ohanian. Do you have any flexibility about the management fee or the development fee? That's my first question.
Yep. So the development fee is part of the capital budget. So this is the real estate expenses really are the operating budget. And on the management fee, it's the cost of what it is to for us to manage that community, which is in line with the marketplace for our type of housing. And, just to kind of go back, it's also something that has been in the budget from the beginning as well.
Okay. And what about the development fee?
Development fee is part of the capital budget. That's the cost that we have going into the project, as well as our fee for time getting this project up and going. As we mentioned, this has been going on since 2013. And
I understand, but so I guess, is there any flexibility?
There isn't, no.
Okay. So, and my second question is, the MOA is interpreted as some people as meaning that Grantham was, or Christopher Heights or whomever, was not going to ask the town for any more money. And I know that it's open to interpretation, but starting here and starting now, is it safe to assume that going forward, Grantham or Christopher Heights or whomever would not come back to the town for more money?
Grantham will not be coming back to the town for more money.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mary, I would add that we did deal with one part of that in a previous conversation because there was some issue raised about building permits and things like that. Was Grantham going to perhaps be coming back to ask for some accommodation on that? And as Walter just indicated, they said they would not.
So they're going to be paying the full building permit value.
Yep. So the building permit value is in the budget that we have. Correct.
It's both the capital budget and the operating budget were also part of the material that was presented to both the CPC and the town when those votes for appropriations were made. Phil, I think you are. Is that all, Mary?
I'm done. Thank you.
Phil?
So let me say, first of all, I support affordable housing. I, as a lawyer, have spent hundreds or thousands of hours representing low-income tenants in court. So this isn't because I'm not in support of affordable housing. But I do feel like I'm concerned about the level of transparency we've had for this project, both for this article and the previous articles. I feel like it's being rammed down our throats. So I have two questions. First, has the town ever agreed to a TIF in the past? And what about our peer communities? How many of our peer communities have agreed to TIFs, and for what circumstances, if we know?
I know the town has not done a TIF before.
Okay.
I know that there have been TIFs in other communities. I don't have those facts here, Phil. I know, Walter, you've had TIFs in some of your other projects, as I recall.
Correct.
Which ones? Can you
Yep,
tell us?
Yeah, sure. We've had TIFs in both our Attleboro and Marlboro community. I've had pilot agreements in our Worcester and our Webster community. And, TIFs are common practice when you bring job creation. And, once again, this project will bring 30 jobs. And the hope is that that's the reason why a TIF from the state's perspective would be approved. But we also know for us, it does help get our 83 units of affordable housing as well for the town.
Is that it, Phil?
No, I have a question. It's more of a legal question, and I'm not saying this as a lawyer, but how do you square this request for what I calculate as $1.68 million in tax breaks over 10 or 15 years with the provision in paragraph 11 that Terry mentioned? And I'll just read. The developer agrees not to request any financial support from the town other than the town funds for the construction and development of the project, i.e. the $2 million. Wasn't that the premise on which town meeting agreed to the $2 million? And isn't this request inconsistent with that? And one other point, this was 2017, the 2016 development agreement and the task force recommendations preceded that. So the town meeting was voting not based on the 2016 development agreement between CHTC and Grantham or the task force. They were voting on this memorandum of agreement from 2017. So I believe the town meeting understood that there was not going to be any further request for financial support. I don't see how you can square that with this $1.68 million tax break.
Okay. Is that it, Phil?
Yeah, I guess I'd like an answer to it. I don't know whether you want to answer it or Mr. Ohanian, or they have a lawyer, but it just seems like it's inconsistent with what we understood at town meeting.
Well, I think I tried to respond before when this presentation was made to town meeting. It was clear both in the pro formas and in the presentation to town meeting that the project would pay a certain amount of tax revenue and ground lease money to the town. And that was in the presentation. That was made perfectly clear. And that is exactly the same amount that is being proposed now. So I understand how you see it. But having been there and having actually made that presentation and reviewed the financial statements when it was being done, this was something I expected to happen. And I was, as you probably know, because I've said so publicly before, and we heard from Jerry, I was very disappointed and surprised that we didn't get this request to the town much earlier than we did. And I've said that to Walter and to others, but this was something that, if you look at the other items in that sheet that Terry pulled out, I don't exactly remember what they were, but one was, I think, additional borrowing, Terry, and we can, and this seemed to be the one that was most consistent with what the budget of the project could do. So I feel I understand and your perspective on it, but my perspective is they said they were going to do this 75,000, And that's exactly what they're doing. So
Okay, I just have one other comment, and that is, Mr. Ohanian just said, Grantham will not be coming back to the town for more money. How do we know we won't get another request for more financial assistance, but it won't be money? It will be some other form of support, whatever that might be. I'm just saying that if we're going to do business with this developer, we have to take this into account going forward. I suspect this isn't the end of the requests.
well, okay, but it's not just a developer. I will tell you that I was expecting this based on the presentation that I made at town meeting and the pro formas that were given to us to review. So this was something I was expecting to happen, not some trick that I thought was pulled on me by a developer, although I was not happy at all with the fact that it came so late in this process, that's for sure. I think I said Tom was going to be next, and then I think I ran out of memory. So,
Mike, it's Stephen. Sorry, Tom. Phil asked about other communities.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Phil, if we've moved on from that point, but I could give some perspective on other
Yes,
communities.
please. Yes,
please do.
So, you know, and I'm not, and my comments aren't a rejoinder to any criticism of Junction Village, but I will say when I learned of Junction Village, the complicated financing and the need for community support looked exactly like a number of projects that I've worked directly on and observed in the municipalities and the other municipalities that I've worked in. And so what's happening, the request for a TIF is completely common in projects like this. I mean, the reality is any project that cannot stand alone as a market rate project, which affordable housing projects cannot, necessarily require contributions from multiple partners, including the state and the municipality. And so this was not an uncommon request. I'll be candid. I think if there was something that struck me in all of this, it was that there was actually going to be taxation associated with the parcel because the parcel is currently under a tax exempt status. And I was surprised that it wouldn't be developed by a tax exempt, not-for-profit developer. And so I thought, well, this is great. We're going to get $65,000 a year in taxation. So I guess, like I said, I think my point is the Junction Village financing and the partnerships that need to make that happen are completely in line with what I've seen. And I mean, I'm talking dozens of affordable housing projects.
Thank you, Steve.
what sort of communities? Not communities comparable to Concord?
All sorts. And it's not the comparableness of the community, it's the comparableness of the project and the restriction that is being placed on the project. Really, and when you have 100% affordable, that restriction, the market you could never make a go of it at market rate. And so it's the level of restriction that really drives most of that.
All right, thank you. As I said, Tom is next, and then we'll go to Susan, and then Quashaw.
Okay. So thank you very much, Mike. I've got several comments and a question. First of all, I was very pleased, but also very surprised to hear that the state had granted the $7.5 million in tax credit allowance. How recently did that happen?
Sure. So we actually found out sometime in June that the award was made. I got a call from the state that they had made the award to the project, and they would typically have a large public announcement, but based on what's going on with the pandemic, I can't speak for the governor, obviously, but I don't think he thought it was appropriate to have a public presentation like they would normally have when awards are given for affordable housing.
We did announce about select board meetings, so Tom.
Oh, okay. I would have expected it to be front page on the Journal, but I was blissfully unaware of it having happened. So congratulations. That's a wonderful happening. So my comment is that I fully understand how the confusion around the $75,000 payment to the town has arisen. And I think I think, in my opinion, it has its root in bullet number 4 of slide number 10, in which I think there's a very important logical fallacy that relates to the assertion that by accepting that amount of money, the town is not going to forego any revenue. There also is an assumption there that if this project does not go forward, nothing will happen with this parcel or with affordable housing in town, that it's as if, that little parcel will become an annex of the Sahara Desert forever, and nothing will ever happen there. I don't accept that. I think if this project doesn't go forward, something else will happen there. And what the tax revenue will be from that something else is something that we'll find out at the time. But I think if it's a development that is valued at, I can't remember what the valuation is, $16 million, it's quite possible that we could see potentially $187,000 annually in tax revenue, which means that by accepting the $75,000, and I'm not taking issue with the fact that we agreed previously to do so, we are foregoing $112,000 of revenue every year, which in Phil's calculation, and I think it's correct, amounts to a $1.68 million subsidy to this project. And I don't necessarily object to that subsidy, but I do object to the fact that we've never taken it into account. It's never been listed as a subsidy. We talked initially when this project came to the Finance Committee about a $3,000 subsidy from the town to the project. That was, and the project supposedly couldn't go forward with any subsidy less than $3 million. Then it became apparent that it could work out with a $2 million subsidy. But this has never been discussed as a subsidy, and in fact it is. And is it a $1.68 million subsidy? Is it a $1 million subsidy? That's open to debate, but it is a subsidy, and the town is foregoing revenue by accepting $75,000 instead of a ground lease plus whatever taxation the assessors and would levy. So I would like now to ask a couple of questions of Mr. Ohanian, because he's spoken on several occasions about pro formas, and Mike, you yourself mentioned pro formas that were given presumably to the select board that, again, presumably described the full extent of the investment. And I'm guessing that these pro formas were either draft offering memoranda that would be presented to investors or lenders or to the purchasers of the tax credits. I think that, well, let me ask, do these documents exist? Are there offering memoranda, or is there an offering memorandum? And is there?
Tom, thank you. So there is a one-stop that we create that does both an operational budget and a development budget. And yes, those have been reviewed by both the tax credit investor and by the bank.
And is that something that you would provide to the town, the members of the Finance Committee, and other germane?
They're in the packet that was distributed in support of this article.
All right, I'm remiss in not having read them. So presumably those explain exactly what the returns are with the TIF, and one could do some arithmetic and figure out what the returns would be without the TIF. Have you those numbers at your disposal? Can you tell us what those returns are?
So the project itself is looking to meet a debt service coverage of 125, and we cannot make a debt service of 125 with the current assessed value of the property because of the taxes that are due.
So that the TIF and the taxes are one element that help get to a debt service ratio of 1.25, but there are many other factors. And of course, I guess those are all represented in these documents that are in the support package for this article.
Yes. Could I interject here? My name's Mike Cucciara, and I'm with the Grantham Group. I'm the Director of Development for the Grantham Group. I recall going before the Finance Commission, was it back when we were initially supporting the articles that went before town meeting. That would have been back in 2017. These issues were raised, and we were fully transparent throughout the entire process. You know what our returns on investment are. The issue here is, think about this just objectively for a moment. We're building a project that's going to cost $20 million, and even by the assessor's own estimate, it's only going to be worth $16 million. So think about that just off the bat. You're effectively flushing $4 million down the drain in value. And the other element of this that you have to take into consideration, and that's just on the capital sort of development budget side of things, where we are looking at subsidizing this in order to buy in that affordability. What we're talking about here is operationally, prospectively going forward. Now, the town has provided a very generous contribution in capital to support the project, but operationally, we've been very transparent throughout the process that we were going to need this support in order to make the numbers work. Now, if the town would like to alternatively increase that capital subsidy to the point where we would be paying full taxes, that would require a substantial additional amount of capital up front. And when we sat down with CHDC at the beginning of this entire process, we said, here's what makes it work. There's no special sauce here. It's very straightforward. We've been transparent throughout the entire process and forthright about what it takes to make these projects work. And quite frankly, the state, given the history of this particular site, I think it would be more than a blemish on the town's reputation if this project is rejected by virtue of the rejecting a TIF, in that the entire origin of this project grew out of sort of, quote, the acquisition of the Walden Woods, which the state considered to be an affront to the development of affordable housing to begin with. Now, I'm not saying that, the town is, folks that are in opposition to the project are, harbor some sort of racial animus towards affordable housing generally, but oftentimes we hear in the affordable housing industry certain dog whistles that sort of suggest, that there are other considerations here. Now, I understand the concerns about transparency, and I think we've been very transparent. You have all of our budget numbers. You have had 4 years of the opportunity to go through them. This is really, we said, here's what it takes to make this project work. Here's operationally what we need in order to buy down the debt, because that's effectively what you're doing by buying this affordability. And I think that this is just, the state is looking for, typically looks to towns to incentivize affordable housing, because this is one way they can do it. At the end of the day, if there's no project, that's 83 foregone affordable units in the town of Concord, and you could be left tomorrow with an unfriendly 40B, after the next census. And that's, then you're really out of time. Then you're not in the driver's seat at all. And the state is not going to look too kindly on Concord's potential objections to that. So I'm just trying to frame this in a larger.
Appreciate that very much. I just want to make sure you understand that there are no dog whistles here. You've just got folks on the finance committee who are very concerned about the town's finances. I want to make sure we use our finances as best we can to accomplish the goals of the town. I think, what did I say you? Oh, no, Susan, you are next. Thank you for waving your hand.
Thank you for all this information. I just want to point out a couple of things and then I have some questions. The first time we ever saw these numbers was the hearing on February, I think it was 24th, and the information was given to us literally that day. So in my mind, this is the first substantive discussion we've all the committees and the citizens have been able to have on this. And I think that's important to note because we're in the middle of August.
Susan, you mean the TIF, correct?
The TIF, I do. I mean the TIF. The first time we saw numbers.
Not all the material.
No, I will point out too that the pro formas have changed from, I think it was last December, to something that was issued recently. Another comment I have is point number 4 on the current agreement says essentially that we're on the hook for 2.6 million. 2,650,000. That's what the exemption could rise to. Now, Tom gave a number of 1.6. So my question is, how do we get to 2.6, which makes us in it for 4.6 million essentially for this project? So I'd like to know why that is instead of the 1.6 that we were just discussing. I have a couple of other questions too. The 30 jobs that are proposed, when I look at the operating expenses, there's salary and wage for administrative and for maintenance. And then there's a $1.4 million for resident services. So I don't know, is that outsourced or why isn't that listed as payroll like the other items? And another question is the square footage of, most of the units are studios. I was wondering about the square footage. Looking at the rent, the 150% of median occupants will pay between $3,000, I think $3,300 a month. The income pro forma has another almost equal to the rent is the services that they're going to provide. So if you're renting for $3,000 and then everything, meals, any kind of service, laundry, housekeeping is extra, then the tenant can expect to pay probably twice that as a month if you're in the $3,000 range. And then following that, I want to know about the how people get into these housing units. They said that until it's fully subscribed, Concord will have a preference. What happens after that? And my concern is that maybe 10, 15 years down the road, there's nobody from Concord that is in this complex. We're paying the public service costs because there will certainly be EMT and ambulance costs with a population that is older and possibly disabled. So in the big picture, I'm wondering whether this is the proper project for Concord.
Okay. So a couple things there. And so the first is the resident services. That's the on-site staff that we have for nursing and nursing assistants. Those are salary or hourly positions for the project. So they're not outsourced. Those are employees of the community. It's just the way that the budget is set up on the state's website, but they are employees of the project. So that's number one. Number two is the project itself, and now we have 23 years. Our first project opened in '97 of history, and the bulk of the residents are from the communities that we serve. And it was going to help elders or the children of elders that need assisted living. So in all of our projects, the primary residents that live in those communities, just like you have in your current affordable housing stock in Concord, you do have many residents that have come directly from Concord into those types of housing units. And that is also true in all of our Christopher Heights projects. So the way the state has it set up is during the lottery process, when the project opens, we will have a Concord preference. After that, there are rules and regulations once the project is, the lottery has passed, that you're then basically taking people off of a wait list to come in, and they could come from other towns. But by definition and by history of what we have, the bulk of the residents or the families of the residents that move in are local. So think about it. If you're looking for your 90-year-old mother or father for assisted living, you know, even though you live in Concord, your goal is not to have to travel to the Cape to have her in assisted living. Your hope is that you're bringing her towards you and she's moving into a place like Christopher Heights. So that is quite common as well. So I think there was another question in there, and
Yeah, about the 2.6 million that's in the agreement for tax relief, when we just figured it's really closer to 1.6.
Okay, that's probably not for me to answer, so I'll let someone else answer that.
I don't know the answer to that question, Susan.
I think it'd be worth knowing just because it's $1 million difference.
We'll see if we can get you an answer.
Okay, thank you.
Patel, I think you were.
Thanks, Mike. I guess I have a similar question around the cost. If I remember one of the slides, Mike, that you showed, I don't know from slide 10, but I think you said that the cost, or that the cost is the same as what was agreed upon there in the budget, or same as in the budget. I'm kind of curious, is the budget the town's budget that you were referencing on that slide, or is it the budget for the project? That's sort of one question I have. And maybe related to that is how did the town arrive at 77% versus 75 or 80 or 90%? Can you help me understand as a newcomer to the issue and the finance committee as to what the logic there was?
At least I can try. 75 was the number that the Grantham Group provided that they would be able to pay to still make their project financially feasible. So that's for the 75. And I think the earliest discussions of that 75 is it was unclear or unspecified how the breakdown between that 75,000 would be between a ground lease for CHDC and tax revenue. So that number was a number that was provided by the Grantham Group that would allow them to be able to put together a budget that was sustainable. So then the hope that they would get the tax credits, they would be able to sell those tax credits and use that money. So that follows directly to your second question, though. If this $75,000 or 65 in taxes and 10 for the ground lease, if that's the amount that Grantham believed that they could do, then you simply work backwards. If this is the assessed value of the property, what does the percentage need to be to get you to that number? So it's just an arithmetic problem.
Yep. And so the 75 was in the original agreement from 2 to 3 years ago. Is that accurate, or is that a revised number?
No, it's the same number that was presented at town meeting and to the CPC as the amount that Grantham could afford to pay the town in either taxes or ground lease and still have their project be financially feasible.
Thank you. So then one last follow-up question, Walter. Walter, can I just ask my follow-up question?
Sure.
So the 75,000 was presented at town meeting a couple of years ago based on presumably a pro forma that at least Grantham had, and which maybe the town had and others had or didn't.
The town had it. It was presented to the finance committee.
And I'm curious, is it possible to take it to walk through, Walter, the differences in the pro forma then versus now with respect to other changes in the pro forma, which I'm assuming there were changes in income projections, cost projections, et cetera. And I'm wondering what some of those major categories of changes were. In other words, did the return on investment should go up or down in terms of the investors? Did costs go up or down? Again, at a high level, just to understand
Sure.
what changed and why this couldn't go up or down as a result.
The biggest cost that we have seen that has increased has really been the construction costs, which is why the state has chipped in as much as they have. It's the cost of development. We went from a $16 million project to a $20 million project. And so that's really where the bulk of the money has gone, and which is why the state has had to chip in those extra dollars. But also, Patel, what I was trying to say before, and I didn't want to cut you off, so I apologize that I had done that, is if the project does really well, right, this isn't a set amount on the amount that the town in CHTC will receive. So right now, based on the assessor's value of how this works, he's anticipating it. I forget the exact number off the top of my head. Let's say it's $14 million. If the project does well and somehow there's a bump in income and a bump in rates, and let's say the project is now worth $15 million. So if it's worth $15 million, the exemption is still 77%. So you're paying more in taxes based on the valuation that has increased. So if the project does well, there's obviously more funds that are able to apply to pay for either real estate taxes or towards the CHD and the ground lease. So those types of things as well happen. And, I think once again, if the project, it's where I anticipate the project to be. And if the project, for whatever reason, if things go swimmingly and the operationally and revenues somehow increase dramatically based on where the rents go with HUD, and the project is able to sustain and pay more during those 15 years, it will, because this isn't a set amount. It's an exemption based on where we think we are today. But that exemption doesn't increase because the value increases. The exemption amount, the percentage of the exemption stays the same. So just wanted to get that out there.
If the project value declines, you get less revenue?
I apologize. Say that again.
If the value declines, there's less revenue to the town, or is the 75 a floor?
So the 75 is the floor. So what we'll do is, okay, long story short, I don't want to take up a lot of time. Basically is the way the agreement will read is the CHTC, if the taxes go down, CHTC will get the benefit of that extra money. So in essence, it's still within the town. The $75,000 is still there.
Yeah, and I tried to make that point in the on slide number 7, where it talked about property valuation being dependent upon the tax rate and the commercial success of the property.
Sure.
Hey, Mike, sorry to jump in. I wanted to, Susan had that question about the difference, and I just wanted to connect Walter's answer to what I believe she was asking. Okay. So you were saying the total value of the $2.65 million in the TIF agreement. What Walter was just saying is, if things go great and the value of the increment, value of the value of the TIF hits 2.65, or I think it's whatever that number. It was originally 3, but because it was originally 3 million, but because we shortened it from 17 to 15 years, or proposing to shorten it from 17 to 15 years, we also reduced the amount on a prorated basis. So that is, once it hits that amount, once the value of the TIF hits that amount, right now we're projecting it in year 15, but it could be sooner than that. Then the TIF goes away, and the property owner is paying full taxation, right, Walter?
Correct.
Right. So but when you say the difference between that and Tom's number based, and I don't want to speak for you, Tom, but I heard, when I heard you describe it, it was based on the premise that a project that's fully taxable could be built on the site, and so we're foregoing that million something because of we're not doing a fully taxable project. But I think the point I've heard Mike try to make, and I think and based on the history of the project, with the current restrictions, I don't know that a fully taxable project would be achievable there. And so, Susan, that's the difference between the two numbers. The 2.6 number is a part of the TIF agreement between the town and Junction Village. The other number is based on a what if, I believe.
Okay, so but the point is we're on the hook for 2.650. The town is in tax relief.
I don't know that I would say we're on the hook for it. It just is once he's gotten the benefit of a TIF worth 2.64 million, that's the end. That's the maximum exposure for the value of the TIF.
Thank you.
All right, Jane, and then Brian.
Hi, thanks. And I know that Brian's been waiting and others, so this is just a very quick question, but it occurred to me, we've talked about the benefits to the town of the one-time Concord preference to those applying for assisted living. And And I know that Walter's said that it very typically this would just continue to be filled with local residents. I don't know how I heard you mention 30 professional jobs. Have you ever operated in a way that would encourage local hiring as well?
Sure. I mean, it's obviously only a benefit to the community itself, just for someone for commuting back and forth into Concord. Absolutely. We'll work with, Stephen in the town or any other resource that you may have that would locally allow us to hire people that are local. They're going to have the history of the town. They're going to know our residents. Families are going to feel comfortable knowing someone at the front desk that maybe is from town. Those are huge successes for the project. So absolutely, those would be big benefits to us.
Thank you. Brian, you're muted.
Hi, this is two clarifying questions for you. Sorry for the mask.
Okay.
So with respect to the credits themselves, now that you have them in hand, do you have an investor lined up already, or do you have to go through the syndication process? And given the way the markets are moving, I'm trying to understand if there's an audience for that.
Sure. Thank you. It's a very, very good question. So we do have a syndicator who we have shopped the project to. They are working with their investors to review assisted living as a portfolio option. They have other of our projects in their portfolio, so they're very interested in getting another deal done. But besides the syndicator that we've used on other projects, where as part of Mike's role, we also shop it to other syndicators that are out there. And even though March, April, and May, obviously very challenging times, very hard hit on our industry, the good news is many things that our towns and our state have done have really helped decrease the number of cases that you see in assisted living and in nursing homes. And people have actually started to move into communities like ours again, and census has started to get back to where it needs to be, which is going to give these investors a lot of comfort in the fact that it's still an asset class that they're willing to invest in. So both between the tax-free investor as well as the mortgage, Brian, I've also started to shop that as well. And we have not had people be spooked or say, not now. So we're continuing down those avenues. The big thing they wanted to see is they wanted to see that you actually have the funds awarded from the state. And now that we have that, they're spending time and resources trying to put a package together that makes sense.
Okay. And then my last clarifying question is, when I arrived at this conversation, 40B was one of the drivers to really kind of push this through, or at least that was my impression. And so I was curious to know, because we've been in this process with you, do these 83 units apply to the 2020 census, or did we blow through that and now it's kind of like we have more runway here? So theoretically, one way or the other, if the town decided not to do this, it doesn't matter anyway, because we're not getting credit for the 2020 census anyway. So, that gives us another 10 years to make up our minds to figure out what's going on. Theoretically, I'm just trying to clarify, like, how does this process work? And maybe that's a Michael Lawson question.
Oh, Walter, you can answer it.
It's actually, I don't exactly, so the 2020 census will be completed, will come out, and from what all indications, which I understand, is Concord will drop below its 10%. What happens is Concord will, once I pull the building permit, those 83 units, from my understanding, go on, and then you have a certain time to get the project to get certificate of occupancy, and then at that point, it's fully on.
Okay, thank you.
It'll be
very welcome.
It'll be fully on as soon as the building permits are issued. Good, thank you, Brian. Dean?
Yeah, I have a couple of kind of technical questions. So the project is identified, and we've talked about 83 units of affordable housing. And I know that there are a lot of very complex ways in which affordability is calculated. But in assisted living, is this a mix of affordable housing, which is, has to qualify for certain income tiers, and other units which are market rate, which kind of balance out the thing, but you get credit for all 83? Can you please just comment on that? And then I have a some follow-ups depending on that, how that's answered.
Yep, sure. So this project is unique in that 100% of it is rent restricted. So the rents are restricted even on what we would consider the market units, the non-tax credit units. So the tax credit units are the 43 units. Out of those 43 units, 26 of them are for 60% of below the area median income, and 17 or 30% of below the area median income. And for those residents, they might be on a state subsidy to have their to help pay for not their rent, but their services that they receive at the community. On the 150% units, those residents will pay a rent, and then for the care that they receive, they will pay privately for those before they spend down their assets and then go on to one of the subsidized units.
So
the nice thing, Dean, just to give you an idea about our communities, is I think Phil had mentioned he's helped low-income tenants in court. I've been doing this for 23 years, and I can tell you today, I have never been to housing court. I have never evicted a resident because of money.
No,
and the reason why that I can say that
was where I was going, Walter. That wasn't my question. My question was really leading towards the 40 units that are not in the 60 and below categories, the 150. Yep. How much flexibility do you have on those 40 units to charge a rent that the market will sort of bear? I mean, that's in order to get more revenue into the project. I'm just asking that question because I need to just understand, anything there where there might be some flexibility in your budgets. That's all.
Yeah, there isn't, unfortunately.
So, because those are fixed. In other words, what fixes the rent of the 40 non?
Yeah, it's the deed that goes along with the land. The land dictated that you could not have anyone live there above 150% restriction. And Jerry,
so that's part of the land lease that comes from, say, the state or the state's constraint. It's not.
I believe the way CHDC got the land was to commit to it.
Okay,
but I don't know the institutional history, but that's my understanding.
That's fine. Okay, so that clarifies that for me. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right. So now I want to ask a question, which is probably more directed at the select board who are crafting the TIF.
Sure.
And that is that the goal of this for the community is to get affordable housing. The way in which we actually apply for and get this TIF is to create an opportunity zone so we can create some jobs. Now that's nice, but that's not the goal of the project for us. It's a good thing, and the state likes to see job creation, but our goal is to create an affordable housing complex. There's nothing in the TIF that says if the state operating as an agent for the IRS finds that the project drops below its requirement to meet affordability goals, and it loses some piece of its tax credit in a given year through that audit process, we're still on the hook to give them a tax credit. And there's no clause in there, and I think I would like to see something in that TIF that says if the IRS reduces the amount of a tax credit in a given year through the audit process because they're failing in the affordability goals that the project qualifies for to get the tax credit, our TIF ought to responsibly also reduce itself by the same percentage. I think a paragraph like that is a reasonable amendment to the TIF language in the TIF agreement. Does that make sense? I mean, I'm just trying to throw that out there if that makes sense.
Just to speak to that slightly, it kind of confuses two separate issues. One is the tax credit compliance period, which is a federal issue, and then the TIF being a state level issue. There's a lot of hooks and, regulatory hooks into the project. We are obligated to maintain our level of affordability. If there is a tax credit clawback, we're no longer the operators of the project, because in that case, our investor will have already excised us for failing to adhere to our partnership, our obligations under the tax credit program. So it won't be with the entity that we represent. However, so that's one issue. Now, the state TIF statute does have some additional hooks in it as well to ensure performance based. So, they're looking at, the TIF is looking at the job side of things. The TIF is how we get to the operational issue.
Let me stop you for a second, Michael. I don't mean to be brief. We've been on the call for a long time this evening. There is a serious disconnect between the fact that we're getting this TIF put together and the goals of the town. The town's goals and objectives are to create affordable housing, and this TIF is fundamentally based on a workaround to allow us to create the TIF. So the jobs are jobs, and the state really wants to see jobs created, but the town wants to see affordable housing created. So I don't think it's unreasonable for us to put something in the TIF that says, if you fall off the rails, then we will all, and the IRS stops granting or reduces the tax credit, we reduce our tax credit. I think that's reasonable. Our goal is affordable housing. The IRS's goal is affordable housing. The state's goal is affordable housing. The TIF wants to create jobs. It's a disconnect. That's all there is.
Thank you.
So I think a quick paragraph added to the TIF that, just spells that out, it would be helpful. That's all.
All right. Do I see any? Terry?
I have some follow-ups.
Hold on, Terry. Jerry, were you going to respond to that?
I want to respond to something that Tom had brought up. I'll be happy to wait.
Okay, go ahead, Terry.
Right, I wanted to respond to some of the other comments. First of all, Mike, I did find again this document. It is, I believe, on the website in the deck. It's April 22nd, 2016, from the Junction Village Funding Advisory Committee. The chairman was Greg House, and it lists as their final, this is their final report. 4 actions by the town, which we did do. Voters allocated $1 million from free cash, $1 million from CPC, Concord Housing Foundation seeking $200,000, and the Home Consortium trying to get another $200,000. Those were the 4 actions by the town. Then there's another section, other possible sources of financial assistance. And under those 4, we have done none of those. And the TIF is the last one. The other ones are a transit-oriented development bond, MassWorks, and securitized cash flow. We haven't done any of these things. So that's why this 2016 memo seemed to make the TIF a remote possibility, along with these other things like a transit bond, and then seemed to be superseded by the 2017 MOA, which we've talked about already tonight. Another follow-up that I have is the 75,000. We've heard tonight that several people really didn't understand there was going to be a TIF, and other people knew that the 75,000 was in the budget, meaning in Grantham's pro forma, not the town budget. And so I guess my question on this one is to Mr. Ohanian, if you knew back in 2016 or 17 about the 75,000, why you didn't talk to the assessor way back then and waited until a few, I think it was a year ago now, 2019.
Sure. Well, as the project became more real and we were getting feedback from DHCD on next steps to take to get an approval, one of the things that we needed to do was to firm up that what I had in there for taxes and other expenses was legitimate. And so that's when I ended up booking the meeting with the town assessor.
Okay, but it's hard for me to understand that.
Sure.
such an experienced developer that you wouldn't have checked with the assessor before you put it in the pro forma?
Yeah, but yeah, sure. But we do have other projects, and I was basing the taxes similar to what I pay in other towns.
Right, but they have different valuations. I know you and I have been over this. We can.
Understood, Terry. I appreciate the comment.
Okay. And just follow-ups very quickly. How long is the mortgage for? How many years?
So it will most likely be a 15-year mortgage with a 30-year amortization.
So you're not sure yet. You say most likely.
That's what we've been discussing with the mortgage holders. With the banks. I don't have a tax credit investor either, nor do I have the final from the bank either. Correct. These are all things that are, once again, the award was given. These are things that are being done now as the due diligence to shop, handled very similarly to how I handle all my other projects.
Is there any possibility of getting, let's say, a 10-year mortgage and having a 10-year TIF?
So the TIF is really to show the tax credit investment. So the tax credits, Terry, just so you know, are 10 years of credits, 5 years of compliance. The tax credit investor has to have assurances for the full 15 years, while the credits can be clawed back. So that's the importance of the TIF. So going to a 10-year TIF does not meet the needs of where the investor is.
Okay, that's really interesting. I've never heard that before. Can you just go over that a little more slowly? You said 10 years of credits and 5 years of compliance?
Yep. So what happens is the credits are $750,000 per year to the tax credit investor for 10 years, which is how you come up with $7.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The tax credit investor is the federal government, the IRS, to make sure that they are providing low-income housing during that entire 10 years. And it's not just the 10 years of credit. They also make sure that there's an additional 5 years that housing is suiting the appropriate income residents in those apartments. So those credits could be clawed back within those 15 years. That's why the 15-year TIF is so critical to the tax credit investor, because they have to be able to show that their budget is working for that entire 15-year period. When we talk about affordability restrictions for this project, it goes well beyond the 15 years. It's going to go for basically the life of the project, the life of the ground lease of the project. So to get our project approved and to get the state approval to get the credits, that's what they ended up not making us, but that's what we ended up presenting to them, that this will be a long-term affordable project for the community.
Okay, thank you. And finally, just
You're welcome.
What Mary Hartman was asking. So Mary asked you if Grantham would come back for any type of financial assistance, and you said no, Grantham will not. What about Christopher Heights? Will they come back for any type of financial assistance?
No, none whatsoever.
Thank you.
Hopefully referral of a resident or two to move in, but that's about it.
Okay.
Jerry, do you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, what I wanted to say is that somewhere in the 2010, 2011, there was a RFP that CHDC put out. There was about, for what I can remember from previous boards, it was 15 different developers that responded. We went to the neighbors with these 15 different options: single family houses, multifamily houses, big developments, little developments, commercial developments, Walters developments, all developments. And the neighbors basically said, absolutely no way for single family housing. Absolutely no way for multifamily housing. Absolutely no way for anything. So the only thing that we could actually get by at that point in time when things started up was a project that we had here, which was a smaller footprint, a smaller amount of traffic, a smaller amount of everything. So I'm not sure. I understand that people claim that they're always in favor of affordable housing until such time as it comes that we actually have to figure out how to accomplish it. It was all transparent. It was all open. There have been previous FinCom committees that received information. Nothing's been hidden. It was not the choice of Walter. It was not the choice of us to have a TIF. The town assessor, it was his choice to want to have the TIF. Now I hear that the townspeople that live near the property, they don't want this now. They want to go back to single family housing, where everything always changes over to what people would rather see when they can't get something that they have. So I understand everybody's concerns and I hear everybody's options of what they would rather see, but the town has voted in favor of this over and over again. And the specifics can be worked out and we can sit down with Walter and read, we haven't even finalized the ground lease, so we can take options of what you have brought up and put into it. But right now, it's really important that somebody step up between any of you and say you'd like to be in favor of this project, or when it goes down the tubes, there's not going to be anything for a while because we won't know what to do. You're looking at 5 years, as far as I know from Liz Russ, we're looking at 5 years plus before we would be able to turn anything around. And by then, who knows what that project would be.
All right, thank you, Jerry. Are there any, we've been at this for quite a while, are there any additional new comments or, yes, Dean?
Okay, so the recent allocation of tax credits was well above and beyond the normal $500,000 per year. It was $750,000 per year. My question is, when was that additional fairly large chunk of money built into your pro forma? I assume back in I don't have it in front of me, so I don't know, but I assume back in 2017, 18, 19, when town meeting is voting, we're allocating money from the CPC, we're allocating $1 million from free cash, that at that point you were presuming $500,000 because that was the legal limit.
Correct.
And now it's $750,000 is what you've actually been allocated per year, but right. None of that can go to pay for our taxes. So I'm sort of like, when did that become part of your budgeting, and how does the pro forma not responsive to that in a way that we might benefit and not have to cough up this money?
Yep. So basically, is the project, because of the cost to build it, it was around 16 million, I think, when we were looking at it. And as we have seen, construction costs have continued to skyrocket, especially here in the Northeast, particularly Middlesex County. And, we're competing with the people that are working in Concord are competing with working in projects in Boston. And you are paying premium dollar for construction, whether it's actual labor, materials, and then it's the site cost. This is a project that will have a lot of site costs to be able to make work. And when all is said and done, those costs have continued to creep up. So going back to the town for those funds was not an option. So I did have a meeting with the state, explained the situation that was going on. They asked what I had done with the town and explained everything that the town had done to the project. And they were really overwhelmed with the generosity that the town has given. And they wanted to make sure that they could show their appreciation to the town by also making sure that they stepped up and put in necessary funds to make the project work. So they did that.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any additional comments or questions from the board or the committee? I don't see any. We have we have a few questions here. So the first one is from Carlin Reed. So Chris, if you could turn Carlin's video and sound on for us. And Carlin, when you come on, would you please identify yourself for the record?
Carlin.
Pretty soon.
There you are.
Aha, now let's start the video. Okay, and there we go.
Right.
Now we're in the right spot. Hi, Carlin Reed, 83 Wits End. I am a member of the PEG Access Advisory Committee, but I'm speaking on my own personal behalf. A lot has been said tonight. I will be brief. I appreciate, Mike, you putting up the amendment that I'm giving you folks a heads up I intend to offer at town meeting. It is now posted on the on the website under Article 16, Article 16 TIF amendment. It's a draft. It's pretty much near finalization. I need to talk to Carmen about it. The reasons for this 10-year term limit for a TIF, if a TIF is approved, and that's an if based on today's comments, have already been stated. I gathered from this meeting, as well as other meetings, a sense of discontent with the TIF of this magnitude. So I'm offering this as a possible compromise of sorts for those who want to pass the article, but don't feel comfortable with the full 15 years as it stands. What you do is up to you, of course, but I have two new points that have not been mentioned tonight. First, and they both start with the letter F, by the way. First one is the finish line. I've heard that phrase. We are not close to a finish line. We still have to have a ground lease drafted. I understand the current draft is for 85 years, and the terms of that ground lease have not yet been finalized. We still have to deal with the open space issue that's part of this program. I think in the development agreement, there is room for a group home that should be discussed. And most importantly, it is what Mr. Banfield brought out, the compliance issue. Who's going to be monitoring the compliance of this project, and what type of terms should govern the annual reports to the town and the compliance consequences as well? Okay, that's the first F. The second F is full staffing. This is some new data. In doing my research on this article and on the Grantham Group, I saw that in Concord, as we know, Grantham has promised to support 30 full-time employment positions. But in their Marlborough and their Belchertown units, they contracted and agreed to support 40 full-time employment units. So why does Concord just deserve 30 full staffers instead of the 40 that the others are getting? That is a question that I have for the Grantham Group, and I appreciate if there's a response on that. Finally, I find the phrase financially feasible, lots of F's in this, to be confusing and squishy. It's more like how much profit you want. Anyway, thank you very much. That's my comment.
Do you want to address the 40 versus 30 employment number?
Yep, sure. So all of our projects are in the staffing that's determined is based on the care that the residents receive and also the design of the building. And for this project, it will be a minimum of 30. I do have every expectation that we'll have more than 30 staff members on site, but for this project in this TIF, it would be 30.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The next comment, so thank you, Carlin. Next is Ned Perry. So if you would turn Mr. Perry's audio on. And Mr. Perry, when you come on, would you please, for the record, identify yourself? There's a little bing, but I don't see Mr. Perry.
He's on.
Are you on, Mr. Perry?
It's actually Cynthia Wood.
Oh. Cynthia, I'm sorry, your screen said Mr. Perry.
I know, I'm using Ned's computer.
No, Cynthia, please identify yourself and then go ahead.
Cynthia Wood, 362 Bedford Street. I have two comments to make. My first is, speaking as a longtime citizen of Concord and also as a former finance committee member, I think that it's a very bad precedent for the town to get into the habit of granting corporate tax relief. And I think it's even worse for Concord to take advantage of a program designed to assist economically disadvantaged areas. That's my first point. My second one is, do we need more assisted living options in Concord? And even if we do, Concord residents get a benefit for only a short time. So it's possible that few will benefit. I think we should be using our affordable housing dollars and tax dollars to promote a more diverse Concord. This project seems to be the least we can do to buy us out of a 40B project. And I think that letting our housing options be dictated by fear of 40B just gets us farther and farther away from living in the kind of Concord that we want to live in. Thank you.
Thank you, Cynthia. Next, I see a sentence by Christine Purple. Ms. Purple, I don't know if you want to make a comment or you were just, so if you, we'll turn on her audio and video and find out.
Hi, it's Assessor Lane Partridge. I'm using Christine's computer as well. Sorry about that. I'm at
Oh,
home.
really tricky tonight.
Yeah, tricky tonight. So,
Please identify yourself.
Yeah. So just a couple comments that the TIF agreement or the TIF program is the only legal way that we can give tax relief for this project. The pilot, there's no such thing as a pilot in state law for this type of project. So the only way we could go was the TIF. So that was the one comment I wanted to clarify, that you know, it's how we can do it to make any difference here.
Thank you very much, Lane. I appreciate it. Next, Mr. Bader, Stephen Bader. It looks like you have a question, so we'll turn on your audio and visual, and then we have one more after Mr. Bader. Yeah, I hope Mr. Bader is actually Mr. Bader.
He's on. There you go.
Yes, Stephan Bader. I am representing myself, 7 River Street.
Thank God. And your address, Mr. Bader?
7 River Street.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
You're welcome. I have 2 questions, if I might be indulged. The first one is why is the operating budget from the new One Stop not on the town website? The town website currently has the document number 85638, only has the first 11 pages of what should be a 33-page One Stop. And how can we assess the reasonableness of the TIF request if we don't see the operating budget for the next 20 years? Because that's what the TIF relates to.
I don't have an answer for that. We were given all of the pro formas, and I forwarded them to the town to be posted on this set of material for this warrant article. Chris, I don't know if I know you're there. Did you have a second point? And so while we try to figure this out.
Sure. The second point is that the latest version of the One Stop, and Walter can correct me if I'm wrong, is dated February 2020, which is obviously before the current pandemic situation. So the question is if there are any increased construction costs related to the pandemic, either because of building code changes or government mandates or just plain best practices for these types of assisted living, senior congregate housing situations, will the Grantham Company or the tax credit investors or people other than the town of Concord absorb those costs? Will Grantham come back and be asking us for more assistance 6 months, a year, 2 years from now because say, oh, well, we didn't know we couldn't put 15 people on one floor and we need more staff or whatever? Because
sure. Very good question, Stephen. And no, the Grantham would not be coming back to the town for any financial resource whatsoever.
Okay. And the February 2020 One Stop, does the version filed with the state have the full 33 pages and the 20-year projections?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. And it's also, yep.
So that should be on the town website so that we can assess whether and to what extent.
Send along. If it's not there, Stefan will get it up.
Yeah, it's not there as of right now.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Dory Keyhole. Dory, when you come on, please identify yourself for the record.
Okay, good evening. Do you have me hearing me now?
We hear you, but we don't see you.
Start the video. Yep, here we go. Okay, here we go. Thank you very much. Thanks for taking my question. I am sorry that
Identify yourself, Dory.
I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. Dory Keogh, 51 MacArthur Road in Concord. And first of all, I would like to respond to Mr. Cucchiera's comment that this would be a blemish on the town. There are those of us in town who care about affordable housing. I've resigned my position as chair of the Affordable Housing Committee of the League of Women Voters so that I could speak to this in the event that I would be saying something that might be in contravention to what the League may decide to recommend. I very much believe in affordable housing. I've spent much time bringing this about. So I hope, Mr. Cucchiera, you're not going to think that this is a blemish on the town. It's more that we're looking at a business deal, if you will, and have some questions and comments about it. One issue that's hampered all of us in making public meetings until they were instructed by the select board in December of 2019 to do so. This may have been inadvertent. It was not a law because it is not a town committee, but it was the understood way that it would be being behaved, so that many of people in the town were not aware of what was going on because they simply were not made aware of it. The other comment is a question for you, Mr. Ohanian. As I now have gone through the minutes of those meetings between 2014 and 2019, I did note that you did commit to the idea that Grantham would be willing to pay $35,000 for ground rent and $40,000 for taxes. Would you explain to me where you got the figure of $40,000?
Sure, it's based on the history of the taxes from our other communities when we come up with it.
So I would expect then that the taxes are all somewhere in that area, although your facilities have a great variety of the number of spaces in them, the number of rooms. Is that right? They do vary a little bit, correct? Yeah.
They're all around 80 units.
They're all, I'm sorry?
They're all about 80 units.
Even Attleboro?
Attleboro is 81.
Really, and that's interesting. How many units are there in Situate?
So Situate is a new project that is still under construction. That is not assisted living. It is affordable housing, 62 plus, hopefully opening in January. And that is 30 one-bedroom apartments.
Okay. I, last fall, spoke with the assessors or the treasurers in the different towns in which you do business and have facilities. And in doing that research, I discovered that it comes out that the average of what taxes are paid by any type of Christopher Heights were considerably different from $40,000 a year. Would you be surprised at that?
Well, I would if, so Dory, give me 1 second here. So back in March, I presented to the Finance Committee the total real estate tax expenses for the 6 communities that I managed aggregated to $206,000.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, what averaged to 206?
So the total taxes paid for 6 communities was $206,000.
And in Worcester, $170,000?
No.
That was incorrect, given to me.
I think we need to be clear here. In Worcester, the number is quite higher, and the paperwork that Mr. Ohanian is referring to is certified as of 2018. And in that at that time it was quite a bit lower, but now it is quite a bit higher.
Yeah. So they're all over, but to say that your average was $40,000 was the way that you were presenting it. I'm just through and see they're all different sizes, different shapes. 12,000, 12,000, 48,000, 60,000, 70,000, 126,000, 51,000, and 170. When I do the math.
Yeah, so I don't have any 12,000 square foot communities, and I don't have any 126,000 square foot communities either.
I'm not talking about, I'm talking about the units. I'm not either, that's right. But the average, when you presented this figure in 2016, the CHDC believed you when you said that your average real estate cost was $40,000. Would you still hold that figure?
So in 2016, it was probably less.
And if it were less, then we're still going by 2016 prices for real estate. This is 2020. Is that still a valid figure that the town has agreed to work by and made that 4 years ago, when you're now saying it was probably less? My concern is this, Mr. Ohanian. People have mentioned tonight that things were not known, that people didn't know these facts and figures. We didn't know what the task force or the Junction Village task force was recommended because that was not done in a public session. So
the Junction Village task force was presented to the select board, so that was done in public. And
my apologies. My apologies. Don't gang up. My apologies. Okay.
That's okay.
But that was at a time when the CHDC was not meeting in public. Their task force must have been, and I appreciate that. But I think there's so many unanswered questions. It's not that people are against affordable housing in this town. It's that they don't think that this may be a project that we want to be working with and to be a partner with. There are too many worries that what will be the next thing that we're going to find out that we didn't know about before. And now we do. Oh dear, now we have to deal with it. So I'm expressing concern, not because this is affordable housing, because I would applaud any kind of affordable housing that will benefit Concord residents. But I don't think that this is going to be the case. So thank you for listening.
Right. Thank you very much. I don't think I see any more questions.
I believe you have a hand up from Terry Rothamel in the hand raising feature.
Oh, God.
Well, I don't have a hand raising feature on my. All right. Well, if Chris would turn on Mr. Rothamel, and Mr. Rothamel, when you get turned on here and your audio's up, you would please identify yourself. I don't have the hold up your hand function, Dean.
Somehow Mr. Rothamel did. So I saw him on the attendees list with his hand up.
Good. All right, great. Hopefully he'll be here with us for a minute and it'll actually be him.
How about the just hold your hand function? Do you have that one?
Tom.
He may have dropped. He was promoted and he's not in the meeting.
Oh, that's unfortunate. Okay.
I don't see him on the attendee list.
Well, he was at the top with the hand raised feature on the attendee list, and that's why I mentioned him.
All right. Well, I don't see any more hands, so let's move on to our last article.